Well, the Big D is back with a best ball theme edition tonight. Before I bring in tonight's guest, please subscribe, like, and share the Spunky Spectrum Sports YouTube page. Figured after a few wayward tee shots today, we get back to football. Also, check out the Big D podcast for the audio listeners on Spotify and Apple. So, joining for us, what are you, the owner and founder of Going for Two, Geoff Lambert. So, Jeff, it's best ball season, so you know what that means.
Sir, time to draft.
Yeah, how many drafts have you done?
Uh, Probably only 5 or 6 at this point. Last year at this time, I had done a lot more, but just been busy at work. But I actually am about to get into one as we speak. So I don't know if it'll start while we're on air or not. But yeah, I'm joining my 7th one right now.
Obviously a lot of everybody's playing in a fantasy football league, but in the past 2, 3, 4 years, best ball has become very, very popular with sites like DraftKings, FanDuel, and Underdog offering best ball leagues where you can draft teams and win big prizes. So, Jeff, what is best ball?
So best ball is basically like a redraft league, but the only part of the league that you actually do is the actual draft. During the season, the weeks play out like any other league does, except you don't settle lineups. There's no waiver wires to do. There's no trades. Your team is your team. Once the week is over, they will automatically put in your best team. Thus, the reason they call it best ball. So really, it's all about the draft. It's 100% about the draft and how you draft. You can't make any changes the rest of the season. Really, you can draft your team and then not look at it again until week 17 and see where you're at, and be perfectly fine with that.
Yeah, so it's based so you get one team, but you don't have to make trades. You don't have to make any waiver moves. It's you basically draft that team, and that's what you have for throughout the whole year. So if you guys get hurt, tough luck, right?
Yeah, people always say like, what's the fun in that? You don't get to manage your team. And then I always ask them, how many mock drafts have you done so far this season? And they're like, oh, I've done like 15, 20 mock drafts. And they're a lot of fun. Well, this is basically a mock draft. It's a mock draft that you could possibly win money from. So, if you're doing mock drafts, you're already doing best ball. You might as well just go ahead and see how well you draft at the end of the season, because mock drafts, unfortunately, you can't tell how well you did. But in best ball, you can. So if you're already mock drafting, just join best ball because it's just as fun.
What's the difference between best ball and a regular redraft or dynasty league? Because to me, I mean, we've all done redraft dynasty, but best ball seems like it would be easier because you don't have to worry about trades, you don't have to worry about picks for 2024 and 2025. You just have to pick a team.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some differences between how you would draft a best ball team. I know, us in the industry like to use best ball rankings, ADP for redraft. And for the most part, it correlates to redraft, but there are some players that will get inflated value. A lot of like boomer bust type guys, because in best ball, you get those boom weeks, they're going to be in your lineup. In redraft, we always say, good luck figuring out which week to play so and so, because he might have two or 3 weeks that are really big during the season, but good luck putting him in your lineup the right weeks. Whereas in best ball, you get the advantage of that already. Those boom bust weeks, you're going to get those boom bust weeks and get those points. So because of that, their ADP gets a little bit inflated in best ball leagues, but not too terrible. And the biggest difference really is the fact that there is no waivers, there is no trading, no nothing. You do your draft and then you wipe your hands of it and then hope it comes out good on the other side.
The one problem that I found out with one of my teams last year was I ended up drafting, I believe it was Matthew Stafford and Jalen Hurts, who both had a week 7 bye week, and then I was thinking like 2/3 of the way through my draft, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to say what I thought.
Yeah, that's one thing you got to pay attention to for sure, because obviously you can't add a quarterback once you have that set up. So if you don't have a quarterback that week that can start, you're pretty much going to have a zero from that spot. Same thing with injuries too. I think one of my leagues last year, I had Kyler Murray, and I backed him up with Ryan Tannehill and somebody else that also got hurt. But all, both those guys got hurt at the end of the season. And I didn't have a quarterback in that league, so I was pretty much, well, this league is over with. I can't win this league with no quarterback.
A couple interesting traits about successful basketball teams. One is stacking. So, can you explain? I mean, we've seen in DFS where wide receivers, you stack a quarterback with a wide receiver, pass catching tight end. Does that go the same in best ball?
Yeah, absolutely. It goes the same in best ball. You want to get stacks of teams that you expect to be high scoring, because when the quarterback is throwing touchdowns and you have his number one receiver, there's a good chance that those touchdowns are going to your guys. You're getting double points. And then another strategy in best ball too, in addition to just regular stacking, it's to look at the week 17 and the week 16 at the end of the season, because if you get that far, you want to have a nice stack at the end of the season. I think last year's winner of the Best Ball Mania, he had the Tom Brady, Mike Evans stack. I think they had like 2 or 3 touchdowns together, and he won it because of that stack. So you can look at the end of the season and figure out, okay, what game is supposed to be high scoring? What game can I get some players from to make sure that if I make it this far, that I'll actually have a piece of this potentially high scoring game.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. You already drafted Cincinnati, Kansas City, the week 17 game?
Cincinnati, Kansas City is the one I'm looking at. Yep, that is going to be a high scoring game. We assume. Obviously, it kind of works out well because the Kansas City side of things, other than Travis Kelce, you can get some late round value of the receivers. You don't really know which one of those guys are going to pop off. So if you were to get like Jamar Chase in the first round, and then you get Joe Burrow in a little bit later rounds, and then you can just get a couple of those KC receivers at the end of the draft, basically for free, and hope that one of them pops off. Hope that one of them has whether it be Kadarius Toney or Sky Moore, or any one of those guys that could potentially pop up at the end of the season. So you can get those for pretty cheap. So you can build a pretty good stack there with those guys.
Besides the obvious Cincinnati, Kansas City, what are some other week 17 stacks? Because there's one I'm very intrigued about. Do you remember that crazy, I think it was 87-point game between Miami and Baltimore last year? And guess who meets week 17?
Yes, I saw that one. That one is on there for sure. It's that's the week that Tua went bonkers in the fourth quarter and just was throwing touchdowns all over the place. Yeah, I do remember that one.
And plus, I think Baltimore's offense is going to be better this year. I think Lamar's going to throw the ball. Plus, he's got Bateman, Odell, Zay Flowers, and don't forget Mark Andrews.
Yep, absolutely. I'm trying to pull up week 17 here real quick because there was a couple other games that I was looking at. Obviously, that Kansas City Cincinnati game stood out to me.
I think Green Bay and Minnesota play week 17 in the dome, which we like.
Yeah, that's a good one to have too. That one is nice because you can get Justin Jefferson, and then Kirk Cousins is getting disrespected, so you can get him, later on in your drafts. Stack up on your running backs and receivers there in the middle, and then get Kirk Cousins a little bit later, so you can have a nice little stack there. I also kind of like that the Detroit Dallas game. It's a Saturday game, but Detroit expected to be a good offense this year. Dallas has pretty much always been a good offense as long as Dak's been healthy. So that could be another game that you're looking at, a Saturday night primetime game where, maybe Jared Goff goes off to hit Jamison Williams and a couple touchdowns, or maybe it's Amon-Ra St. Brown. Obviously, you got CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks on the other side. So it's a game that can definitely shoot out for sure.
I mean, would it be crazy if you're going to stack Detroit Dallas? I mean, would CeeDee Lamb a late 1, early 2, and then maybe go Amon-Ra?
Yeah, you could definitely do both of them for sure. You could definitely do that. I personally, when I build my best ball leagues, I like to have a lot more receivers than I do running backs. I know running backs tend to get hurt, but if you can get a good running back that's going to last the whole season, having those receivers, when those receivers have those boom games, they're typically more than the running backs. They have those 160 plus yard games, a couple touchdowns, and then the PPR side of things. with underdog. I think it's half point PPR, but still you get those points for receptions. That adds up pretty quickly there, and having a couple receivers on your bench there that can potentially go off on a certain week is a nice advantage to have.
Well, you mentioned how you are such a wide receiver lover, but one strategy that has become prevalent not just in redraft but in best ball is the zero running back strategy. So, can you explain what the zero running back strategy is?
So the name kind of suggests that you're not going to draft a running back, and that's absolutely crazy. You're definitely drafting running backs, but what you're doing is you're going to stack up all your receivers, all your skill players early in the draft. You're just going to keep waiting on running backs. And then the idea of it is you're at the end of your drafts, you're just going to draft a crap ton of cheap running backs because we know in the NFL, running backs get hurt. Guys will, we weren't thinking we're going to be great to begin the season, all of a sudden get this great opportunity and start putting up mega points. So your hope is that in the zero RB that if you get a bunch of running backs that you're going to hit on one or two of those guys. One of those guys last year was Jerick McKinnon. I actually won my home league, a dynasty league with Jerick McKinnon. I traded for him midseason for a 3rd round pick. And then all of a sudden he goes bonkers towards the end of the season there, and I end up winning my home league. But a guy like that was probably free in your drafts if you had gotten a Jerick McKinnon, late in your draft as one of your late round flyers, and then all of a sudden he starts popping off at the end of the season. Then you're in good shape, especially if you stacked a couple of receivers early in the draft. Now you got good receivers, you got a running back that's going to go off at the end of the season, and you'll be in good shape after that.
Yeah, I know Ramondre Stevenson was a good zero running back last year because everybody thought Damian Harris was going to be the lead tailback in New England, but Stevenson ended up being the #1 guy with Harris is going down with some injuries.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it happens every year, right? I mean, Brees Hall also went down in Zonovic McKnight or whatever his name was, Bam Knight. He came in and had a couple good games there. But if you had Brees Hall, you took him pretty high in your draft. Once he went down, you're pretty much SOL at that point. But had you done zero RB and stacked some of those guys that, even like a Jeff Wilson, when he got traded to Miami, he had a couple games there where he really popped off in Miami. Things like that just kind of happened every single year where you get a guy that just steps in for an injured player. Madison for the Vikings been doing it. He made a career out of it, really. Whenever Dalvin Cook goes out, Madison comes in and gives you Dalvin Cook type numbers. And you can get him for, 5, 6, 7 rounds later than you can Dalvin Cook. So a guy like that's a good one to have in zero RB.
How many leagues did Jamal Williams win last year because he scored like 58 touchdowns from the 2-yard line?
Yeah, he was my co-host on my show on Wednesday nights, the Armchair Fantasy Show. He was talking about him all offseason last year about how free he was. I mean, he was basically free. He was so cheap, and you knew he was going to get some of the volume because they have Swift, who's not. We've seen that they don't want to give him the ball too much. Obviously, he got hurt as well. Williams just went bonkers last year. I think he had 18 total touchdowns, and a lot of them were from the 1 or 2 yard line. But hey, it's still fantasy points.
Yeah, fantasy points are still fantasy points, whether it's from the one or whether from the other team's one or your one like Gabriel Davis against the Steelers.
Yep, absolutely.
So zero running backs become commonplace in fantasy football, but I don't think I've heard this term until a day or two ago. Zero wide receiver. What is
zero wide? Zero wide receiver. It's got 2 names. I actually like the other way of saying it is instead of saying zero receiver, you say hero RB. Which basically means you're going to stack running backs. You're just going to get, top running backs. You're just going to fade the receivers. Again, the idea is that you can hope that you hit on a couple of those, breakout guys that no one's talking about. Personally, I think it's a little more difficult to hit on those unknown receivers than it is unknown running backs because, with running backs, injuries are very prevalent, whereas receivers, it doesn't happen quite as often. They still get hurt, but not quite as often as running backs. And then even when they do, have those guys step in, it's easier for a running back to be a first year or second year guy and step in and still play really well, because the position isn't very complicated. It's, you have your gaps, you have your schemes to block it, and that's it. Whereas receivers have, chemistry to build with their quarterback. They got to learn the route tree. They got to learn all the hand signals. They got to be able to read the defense. They got to be able to do all these things that running backs don't have to do. So because of that, there's not as many breakout guys at receiver that step in for an injured guy and actually have a really good season. It happens, obviously, but it's not quite as prevalent as it is with the running back. So I prefer to go zero RB if I'm going to do it at all. But hero RB is something that I've heard people using that phrase and that strategy a lot in recent years.
Maybe especially some of these great PPR guys like a Brees Hall. Who was the guy with Denver? Javonte Williams.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Both those guys, going down really hurt. I mean, in that dynasty league I was talking about that I actually won, I actually have Javonte Williams and Brees Hall, and I had Kyler Murray. And through some great waiver ads and some trades, I picked up Jerick McKinnon, which obviously helped me out. I ended up making a trade for AJ Dillon, which he ended up working out towards the end of the season. And I had Sam Darnold as my quarterback, and I won a championship with those three guys because I had nobody else to play. But sometimes it just happens that way.
Hey, let me tell you this: in my big money league, in one of my big money leagues last year, I drafted Justin Jefferson, #4 pick, and then I traded him for Christian McCaffrey because Javonte Williams was ACL, and I knew, and it was to my best friend, and I knew his team was not going to make the playoffs, and I'm like, Justin Jefferson's not beating me in the playoffs. I need a running back.
Yeah, absolutely. And he had a bad last game too. Because actually in that dynasty league, it was kind of funny. I actually had, I lost Brees Hall, I lost Javonte Williams, I lost Deebo Samuel for a good portion of the season in the middle. Obviously, I lost Kyler Murray. My backup quarterback was Ryan Tannehill. He also got hurt and went out. So at one point in the season, I'm like, okay, I'm going into a rebuild mode. I'm just I traded away Christian McCaffrey. I'm like, I've had him since his rookie season. I drafted him as a rookie. I said as soon as his value goes back to normal, I was going to trade him away. So I traded him away. I got him Jalen Waddle straight up for Christian McCaffrey. And then I just needed a running back to start. And I reached out to a guy and said, hey, I just need a running back to put in my lineup every week just to have somebody. I'll send you a 3rd round pick for Jerick McKinnon. So he sent me Jerick McKinnon. Obviously, he goes off at the end of the season. And the ironic thing is the guy that I traded Christian McCaffrey to is the guy that I met in the championship game. And I ended up beating the championship game with a bunch of scrubs, Sam Darnold and Jerick McKinnon and a couple other guys that, I had to fill in for injuries. Now to beat him because of it.
I won one of my championships with like one of the most not the sexiest looking roster ever. I think that was the week where the Antonio Gibson was in COVID jail, and I used Jared Patterson as one of my running backs. It was because I got the 101 in that league, so I took McCaffrey, and that didn't go well.
Right. Yep. That's the price of going running backs. One of them gets hurt, you're pretty much SOL at that point.
I mean, I drafted McCaffrey 102 in one league, and then Jefferson 104. So, I mean, sometimes you feel like a nut, and sometimes you,
yeah.
So, obviously, their best ball contests are getting bigger and bigger. DK's contest is 10 million, $10 an entry, 150. I think Underdog's best ball contest is 15 million, and how much is that? $25 a pop?
Yeah, and 3 million to first place.
Oh boy.
Yeah, that's a big one.
So I mean, what are the kind of contests you're targeting?
So I have pretty much gone exclusively to Underdog. I did start with DraftKings because I didn't really know Underdog that well when they first started out. But now I pretty much use Underdog exclusively. I think their interface is better. I like their contests better. I like a lot of their features better. In the DraftKings app with Best Ball, it becomes almost too crowded with DFS being mixed in there as well. So personally, I don't play much on the other applications. I use mostly Underdog nowadays.
But if you 150 max at 15 mil, that's the $3,750. I mean, not many of
Yeah,
many of us have got.
Yeah, Not people got that kind of bankroll, that's for sure. I don't play the 150 lineups. I don't I play a lot of best ball leagues, but I don't play quite that much money in the off season.
How much I mean, what kind of contests are you targeting?
I play a lot of private leagues. Like I mentioned, the one that's getting ready to start here in a minute. It's a 12-man private league. That's so, I get some guys from Twitter or some guys from my Facebook groups or some guys from my website that just we all kind of just play. I got ones with friends. I do join some random ones whenever I get bored. Sitting in bed, can't sleep. Oh, let me just go do a best ball draft real quick and jump in one and do it. And I play a lot of the puppies. And, they have the best ball mania is the big one, but then they have the puppies and they have different payouts that are smaller entry fees, sometimes $5, $3. So I'll play a bunch of those. Last year I played the one I actually did the best in. And I didn't see it this year. They had it up briefly and I didn't get into it, but it was the rookies and sophomores. It was basically, all the rookies that hadn't been drafted yet. So you're basically just drafting on talent. You have no idea where they're landing at. And all the rookies from the year previous. And everybody had rookie fever in Dynasty. So all these rookies were going super high that had no landing spot. We had no idea where they were going. But I played it smart and I pretty much drafted exclusively the second year players and stacked all my teams in there. And one of them I went all the way to the semifinals before I finally knocked out. So that one really ended up that one contest paid all my entry fees from all my other contests because it did so well.
Yeah, I will say this. Last year I played, so I mean, what would be a good success rate for making the playoffs? Because I think I played 25 best ball teams and I think like four of them made on DK, so 4 to 25, 16%. I mean, what would be a good success rate for
Probably 20. I'd say 25% is probably what you're aiming for. It's hard to hit that, but yeah, if you can get to the 25% range with your best balls. So if you're playing 100, if you can get to it in 25 of them, then you're good.
I was 4 out of 25, and that was my first year playing best
Yeah,
ball.
I mean, that's not bad. 60% is not bad, especially if one of those four teams can go far, in the tournament and then end up paying for your stuff. But yeah, you typically, if you can get between 20 and 25% of your lineups to get into the playoffs, at least, it's a good thing.
All right, Geoff. So now we get to the fun part of the show, ranking. So starting at quarterback, who trying to think who'd be the top best ball quarterback? I'm guessing Jalen Hurts, right? Especially with his rushing upside.
Yeah, I've got Hurts number one with the rushing upside. I mean, you can't go wrong with any of those top guys. There's a couple of them, Joe Burrow, we mentioned, Patrick Mahomes, obviously, Josh Allen. But I think if gun to my head, I had to pick one of them, I'm taking Jalen Hurts. He's got the great weapons. He's got probably the best offensive line. The Eagles use him, as a rushing, goal line sort of running back. He gets those 1 yard touchdowns like you wouldn't believe. So because of that reason, I think he's the number one quarterback to have in best ball right now. The only thing I am scared about with him, though, is because he's a running quarterback, is the fear of injury. Whereas, a guy like Mahomes, you don't quite fear that as much because he's not running quite as often. But the upside is definitely there for Jalen Hurts to crush it. So I think he's my 101 in quarterbacks.
Does underdog have 100-yard rushing bonus like DK does?
I don't believe so. I was trying to actually pull up their scoring now because I don't think there's a 100 bonus. I think it's just a straight half PPR standard type league where there's no bonuses for that. I got it all pulled up here.
Which makes Jalen Hurts upside even more prevalent because nobody's getting the 100-yard bonus, whether it be a receiver, running back, or quarterback.
Yeah, and it's 4 points for passing touchdowns too, which also favors the running quarterbacks as well because he's getting 6 points for his rushing touchdowns. And a guy like Mahomes, who doesn't get as many rushing touchdowns, he's only getting 4 points for his passing touchdowns.
So, who's one guy one quarterback you're looking to draft, and one guy you're not looking to? You're looking at drafting, and one guy you're not drafting.
So drafting, it's kind of hard because there's a lot of them that I'm going to draft. I'm going to try to have a lot of exposure to the top guys. But if you're looking at just the value of the quarterback and where you can get them, I like Kirk Cousins a lot. And like I mentioned earlier, stacking him with Justin Jefferson is a great way to build a lineup. He's going super late. He's super consistent. The Vikings last year with their new offense passed a lot more than they have in the past. That will continue this year. So I think Kirk Cousins is the guy that I'm looking for later in some of my rounds to have as maybe not my QB1, but definitely my QB2 and potentially my QB1 if I have a build that just kind of the quarterbacks go early enough that I don't want to take them that early. I can get Kirk Cousins and be perfectly fine. Now, if I'm at the point where I need to take one of the top quarterbacks, we mentioned Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, those guys with the rushing upside. Looking at those guys definitely. But sometimes that cost is just too much. I don't want to pay for it. Where I'm looking at like, okay, I can get this good running back or this good receiver, or I can pay for a quarterback. That he would have to have like one of those top 50 passing touchdown type seasons, one of those MVP type seasons to really be separated from the rest of the pack in a one quarterback type scenario. Now they did do super flex. That changes things obviously. I'm in a few of those best ball super flex leagues on underdog, but for one quarterback leagues, the difference between the top quarterbacks and the middle of the round quarterbacks is not always that much. So you can wait on quarterbacks in a best ball league.
And then who's one guy you're not maybe looking to avoid or maybe draft later if possible?
Let's see. For quarterbacks, I'm trying to think of a guy that's popular that I don't like. So I'm not drafting any of the rookies. Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, those guys are, pretty popular choices in some of my leagues as far as dynasty goes, obviously. And they have rushing upside, but I don't see myself taking either one of them at their cost. Trying to think of another quarterback that I'm avoiding. There's really not a ton that I'm avoiding per se, because I think every player has value at some point. And you get down to those late rounds and you're looking at, okay, my quarterback 3, you're looking at guys like Ritter for the Falcons, which, he's super cheap. So he's someone that I would draft super late. So at his cost, I don't mind Ritter. So there's not one guy that I think that I'm necessarily avoiding. It's just depending on the cost you have to pay for him.
Okay, running backs. I think it'd be a battle between Austin Eckler and CMC for the one-on-one there, right? Especially in a PPR league.
Yeah, I definitely think that those two guys are going to be up there for sure. People are drafting Bijan as a top running back as well. I don't know if I'm quite there yet with him being a rookie. We've seen prospects before come in and start slow, like JT a few years ago. He was the next big thing, and he started off super slow to start the season. So I don't know if I'm going to take Bijan as high as he's going. I love Bijan. If he falls to the second round, I'll take Bijan, but I think he's going like 107 right now, and that's just too rich for my blood for a rookie. Especially for a rookie on the Atlanta Falcons who was not very good last year. I mean, they did run the ball a ton, but they weren't a very good team, didn't score a lot of points. So I don't know if I want to invest my first round pick into a guy like that. I don't really know yet.
Okay, so who are you looking to draft and who you're not and who you're not looking to draft running back wise?
Running backs. So I've been getting a lot of Josh Jacobs. I think I don't know what the deal is, why people are fading him so much, but I think he's going. I got his ADP pulled up here. He's going 27th overall, and the workload that he's about to get is going to be ridiculous. He had a huge workload last year. I think over 400 total touches between passing and rushing. And with Jimmy G, as his quarterback, the check down Charlie as they call him. I think Jacobs gets more involved in the passing game. He still gets all the bulk of the rushing yards. That offensive line is pretty good, so I do think that Jacobs is a guy at his price point that I can give you the RB1 type upside for a guy that you're not really paying a premium price for right now. So he's got one guy that I'm definitely looking at. I'm also looking at Najee Harris. Najee Harris is so undervalued right now. I think he's going. I want to say his ADP is 30. It's 38. So it's basically top of the 4th round. That is way too low. I mean, everyone. Okay, yes, he had a down season last year, but he also had a Linz Frank injury start the season. If you look at his numbers at the first half of the season compared to the second half of the season, he was a different player. I think he finally got healthy at the end of the season. He found his legs underneath him. I think with a full season of being healthy, that offense I think has improved. Najee Harris as a 4th-round pick right now is this steal. He's going to get all the workload. Tomlin's always been a coach that gets one running back. There's no by committee when you come to Tomlin. He's basically got one guy that he's going to give the ball to all the time, and it's going to be Najee Harris as long as he's healthy. So Najee Harris is definitely somebody that I'm looking at.
And wide receiver, I think we both can say this. It's a clear one-on-one wide receiver, and his name's Justin Jefferson, right?
Absolutely. I mean, Jefferson is he's an absolute monster. I think you can make the case for Jamar Chase too. But Jefferson, I don't think has as much competition for targets as Jamar Chase does. And so I do think Jefferson and Kirk Cousins is the type of quarterback that he's going to throw it to you regardless, whether you're covered or not. He's just going to still throw it to you. So give that chance to Jefferson to get the ball. So he's definitely somebody that is the 101. There is one guy that's super undervalued that I think I've been looking at and trying to get in a lot of my leagues, and I talked about him last night on my show as well. We did an overvalued, undervalued segment, and that's Deontay Johnson for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's actually being drafted below guys like Treylon Burks, Kadarius Toney, Jordan Addison, who's a rookie. He's going below his teammate George Pickens, and he had 147 targets last year, which is a great number to have for a receiver. And he had 0 touchdowns. There has to be some positive regression there. He has to catch touchdowns. You can't, be targeted that much and not catch touchdowns. So I think some positive regression is coming for him. I think the hate has gone too far on him. So at wide receiver 39, he's being drafted at 77 right now. Johnson's someone I'm looking to draft in a lot of my leagues for sure.
And maybe looking to not draft.
I am not drafting Calvin Ridley at his cost. He is sitting right now at wide receiver 17. So basically a high-end wide receiver 2. This is a guy who hasn't played in nearly 2 seasons. And not only that, he's going to a brand new team with a brand new quarterback and a brand new offensive system. Hasn't played in 2 years. Trevor Lawrence and Christian Kirk had a good chemistry. They have Zay Jones who had good chemistry. Travis Etienne's catching passes. I mean, I don't know where Calvin really fits in here. Where does he get the volume to get to receiver 17? There's just no way I'm spending that money on him. There's guys going ahead of him. Guys that are going behind him like Amari Cooper, Christian Kirk, Jerry Jeudy, DJ Moore, all guys I would take over Calvin Ridley for sure. So he's somebody I'm avoiding.
And then tight end, Kelsey's 101, and I think has been that way for like the last 6, 7, 8 years.
Yeah, it's Travis Kelce, and then a whole lot of space, and then probably Mark Andrews or TJ Hawkinson probably would be the number 2 there. But yeah, it's Kelce and then a bunch of other guys that are just they're decent. They're just not Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce is basically a receiver playing tight end.
Okay, so for somebody looking to play best ball, what are some do's and don'ts?
All right, so we talked about stacking. Do stack. I know it feels a little weird because in redraft leagues you don't always want to stack because you don't want you have that bad week and then all of a sudden both these guys are bad and you lose your matchup. In best ball it's different. You want those peak weeks. You want those games where they're going to be going off. Obviously, be smart with it. Don't stack like Jordan Love and Romeo Dobbs. You got to stack the teams that are going to be scoring a lot of points. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce is a good stack, and Burrow and Chase is a good stack. Kirk Cousins and Jefferson is a good stack. So definitely you want to stack. I would say on a don't side of things, for me personally, the way I build my lineups is some people try to have exposure to everybody. Like they want, they draft, whatever, 20 leagues, 30 leagues, whatever. They want, I want a piece of this guy and I want a piece of this guy and I want a piece of this guy, which is fine, except that you're going to be limiting your ability to win those leagues because you have to hit on all those guys. I like to limit my pool a little bit. I'll have a good core group of guys that I'm pretty much trying to get in all of my leagues. A couple quarterbacks here, a couple receivers I'm stacking them with, have a good core. And then the fringe people, the guys that are sort of on the outside there, that's when you sort of start picking and choosing. And as long as you're good in your process and you can get that good core of people, As long as they do what you expect them to do, and then you hit on one of those fringe guys, then you start getting to the point where you're gonna start making some money. But if you're trying to spread yourself so thin and have a little bit of this guy and a little bit of this guy and all your teams, and you're just trying to mix it up, it's going to be very hard for you to win money because one of your teams might be good, but the rest of them are going to be terrible because you pick different players in every single league. So I try to have a good core of people. Same thing in DFS too. I do the same thing in DFS. You want to have a good core, do your process, figure out your projections, who you want to get, go out and get them, and build your team around them, and not try to spread out too thin.
All right, Geoff. Thanks for hopping on. Hopefully, best ball teams bring us plenty of dough this year.
Absolutely, man. It's May, and I'm excited for the NFL season already. It's crazy.